Welcome everyone to session 3 of the 4 wellbeing workshops that Whittlesea Council have asked Nimai National to put together for them during this COVID isolation lockdown extraordinary time that we are finding ourselves in. Welcome if this is the first session that you have attended. It's nice to have you on board. Welcome back if this is the third session or the second session. If you've attended one of these sessions previously, welcome back. Hopefully, if you have attended or jumped into one of the previous sessions, there has been some food for thought and something of value that you have taken away from those sessions. So today we're going to be talking about maintaining connection, and that is something that has been mentioned in previous sessions, and it's something that I think is particularly important at the moment and at any time really, to think about how we maintain connection, because social isolation is a very significant factor in terms of our physical and our mental well-being and our emotional health. So it is harder to, or can feel like it's harder, particularly at the moment when we are restricted in our activities and our movements, still somewhat, to feel as connected as we usually do. And it's worth acknowledging that some people might already have been experiencing a degree of social isolation, or feeling a sense or experiencing a sense of a lack of connectedness, and then COVID has come along and has kind of added to that sense of disconnection or lack of connectedness. And I think in the previous session, I may have spoken about connection in terms of connection not just being connected to people, but it can be about being connected to things that are outside of ourselves, things that are meaningful to us, things that are important to us. So connection encompasses lots of different things, and we'll go through what some of that might look like during the current COVID time, and how we can be a bit smarter and creative about how we maintain a sense of connection at this moment, because it is even more important than it usually is at the moment for us to feel connected in order to maintain all aspects of our well-being and our health in the most optimal way possible. So thank you for joining in with today's session, and hopefully you get something from it. So a question for us all: what can I do right now, no matter how small it may be, that improves life for myself or others I live with or people in my community? And whatever the answer is, to be doing it, to do it, and to engage in it fully. And we talked in the last session, in session 2, about meaning and purpose. We talked about how important it is to engage in things that are meaningful, important to us. And, connecting isn't about just meeting our own needs around connection, but connecting can also be recognising what we can do for other people in terms of fostering and promoting their sense of connectedness, which in turn will help support our own sense of connectedness. And it can feel like, particularly because at the beginning of this lockdown isolation period, that the messages that we were hearing were all about physical distancing and social distancing, and what's the difference. And social distancing was the phrase that was thrown around and said a lot at the beginning, but I think people may have misinterpreted that or misunderstood that, in terms of that social distancing is actually a way of us shutting ourselves away from people, where in fact it's actually about physically distancing from people, but not socially disconnecting from them. So I guess that's important to think about, that it's about physical distancing, not social distancing. So we're still wanting to promote that sense of connection, connectedness. We're just going to watch, I think this video goes for maybe a couple of minutes. This is a video that's been put together by an American organisation who have a lot of resources online. So it's just a very kind of simple, neat video about why it is important to connect, and their suggestion around 3 components of connectedness that they feel is important to think about at this time. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the technology will work for me. Right, we'll go back. Let's try again.
We learned in our last video, Your Brain on Social Distancing, that we're not built to be alone, and that the longer we feel lonely, the more our bodies start to break down, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Whether you're social distancing all by yourself or with a partner or family members, the COVID-19 pandemic has surely made your social interactions much fewer. Whatever your situation is, it's totally understandable to feel lonely. We feel it too. Here are 3 tactics to help you in the fight against loneliness. 1. Recognize your loneliness for what it is. Loneliness, like hunger or thirst, is a natural way for your body to tell you it needs something. Connection. You're not sensitive or weak. You're a human, a social creature. So take your feelings of loneliness seriously and objectively, just like you would for feelings of hunger or thirst. 2. Be vulnerable with at least one person. Pick someone who you can confide in and who can confide in you. Connect regularly via video calls or over the phone. It can be scary to talk about your feelings, but you'll both find that it's a great remedy for loneliness. 3. Be part of something bigger than yourself. Participating in greater society is critical for feeling connected. Thanks to technology, you can connect to something bigger without leaving your home. Consider finding a cause or nonprofit to follow and support. Lastly, we want you to know that you're not alone in your loneliness. In fact, this is one of the rare times in history that people all around the world, of all different cultures, languages, socioeconomic groups, are experiencing the same thing together. We have more great videos coming your way, so be sure to click subscribe. For more content and resources to stay happy, healthy, and connected, visit closersocialdistancing.com. Help us get the word out about combating loneliness.
Sorry for the abrupt ending there, with just as the start of the adverts begins. So I think that video very succinctly and neatly highlights some of the challenges that the social isolation or the lockdown or the social distancing, physical distancing might be bringing up for people. And they very much use the word loneliness, which I guess loneliness could be considered to be the opposite of connection, or if you are not connecting or you are feeling a sense or experiencing a sense of disconnection, loneliness might be one of the emotional responses or feelings that you are holding. And I think it's worth saying that loneliness is quite a strong word. It's quite a powerful word, quite a loaded word, but I also think it's really important to actually highlight it because for people in particular social situations, if people are living on their own or don't have family or significant people around them, loneliness can be a very real experience at the moment. And if it was something that you were experiencing previously, it's going to be even stronger of a sensation and a feeling and an experience in these current times. So I think it's really valuable that in that video they did highlight and use the word very specifically to be loneliness. So the encouragement in that video was to recognise your loneliness and what it's telling you. They use the examples of, if you're hungry, your tummy tells you, it makes noises and tells you that you are hungry so that you give it food. So it's communicating a need to you. So your loneliness or your experience of loneliness that you might be feeling is telling you that, hey, I'm feeling a bit disconnected, or there's not so much connection happening in your world at the moment. So maybe can we do something about that? Are there some steps that you can take to start combating that loneliness? So it's actually a helpful emotional response in that it's telling you and leading you to what you need, which in this case is connection or connectedness. The second point they raised in that video was about being vulnerable with at least one person, a person that you trust. That could be somebody that you might be sharing your living situation with. It might be someone outside of that situation, someone outside of your family unit. It could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be a neighbour. So it's not easy, I should say. It's not easy to be vulnerable. It's not easy to open ourselves up, to talk about our feelings and our emotional states, particularly if we are feeling stressed. Sometimes it can feel like we're not managing those feelings very well. And it does take, to almost some extent, it does take some skills to be vulnerable, and it certainly takes a lot of trust and a lot of openness and generosity on the part of the person that you are sharing your story or your experiences with. So it's useful to think about for yourself, is there that one person, or do you have that one person, at least one person that you can be vulnerable with, and, you know, I guess really let them in on what you're experiencing. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail in the next slide. And the third point they raised in that video was about being part of something bigger than yourself. And that we talked about in session 2 when we were talking about meaning and purpose. And in terms of what that sense of being part of something bigger than yourself creates, is it can promote a sense of belonging, it can promote a sense of purpose, it can present a sense of meaning, and it can also provide an opportunity for you to get outside of your own thoughts and to think about something else other than what is going on in your experience. So that really well, I think, highlights, very neatly highlights some of the themes that we were talking about in session 2 around meaning and purpose. So the second point on the previous slide about being vulnerable and having a person or persons that we might take that vulnerability to, it's not easy, because often when we are vulnerable, we are opening up and connecting with feelings that are difficult and are perhaps not ones that we'd like to connect with. And again, we talked about that in session 2, about noticing what's coming up for yourself, and perhaps at the moment you are being almost forced to connect with feelings or emotions that you wouldn't normally be connecting with. And of course, we're in such an extraordinary situation at the moment that's very, very real and very possible that will be your experience. So I think it's good to acknowledge that those difficult, uncomfortable feelings are going to happen and are going to be experienced by all of us during this time, and they'll come and they'll go. Some might be more constant, some might creep in when we least expect it, and they can, you know, be a whole range of emotions and feelings. So that opening up, that being vulnerable, does create that space for those feelings to be heard and to be identified. And it's also about being kind to yourself and noticing what's going on, so that you can then, I guess, try and combat those feelings in the most appropriate way. And knowing that, we talk about normalizing a lot in mental health, knowing that the feelings that you're having are probably being felt by any number of people that you know, that you don't know, by everyone that is going through this experience at the moment. So knowing that they are normal reactions and normal responses to be having, whilst it doesn't diminish or take away the feelings that we're having, it is really helpful to recognise that actually they're quite normal and that it's okay to be feeling the way that you are. And they said that at the beginning of the videos in regards to loneliness, that it's okay, it's going to happen. And again, that recognising and being very honest with ourselves about what we're experiencing, you know, gives us that opportunity to be kind to ourselves so that we can look after ourselves in the most appropriate way. And they talk about, you know, self-kindness or self-compassion is another term that we use around that being, you know, a really strong strategy for how we cope in a crisis. And, you know, this information came from a particular website where they use the example of, if you've ever flown and they say, you know, when you get the safety talk at the beginning of the flight, please put your own oxygen mask on before you try and help others. So another phrase or terminology that we might use in mental health sometimes is you can't pour from an empty cup. So in order to look after other people, we first need to look after ourselves. So promoting that self-kindness, often starts with self-awareness as well. So understanding our own experience, understanding what our own current needs are, and knowing what to do about them and where to go with them, who to take those needs to. So we might have identified that we're having some particular feelings or emotional responses. As per the suggestion in the video, there's the encouragement and the invitation to be open and vulnerable with a person of your choice. How do we do this? How do we find that people or persons or thing that we are connected to? And sometimes it can be helpful to think about, and I think I mentioned this in the second session, about who is in your circle. So you know, if you are in the middle of the circle, there might be people on the most immediate circle around that who might be the people that are the closest to you, and that could be the closest in their geographical location. It could be closest in terms of the relationship that you have with them, the significance of your relationship. And then there might be other circles outside of that circle that might include neighbours or friends that perhaps you see or have semi-regular contact with, that you go to for particular things. So there might be someone that you do particular activities with that might be more on the outside of the circle. And that diagram there is just a very simple representation, and I guess a point to start thinking about for yourself. If you were to draw your own kind of map of circles of connectedness or connection, thinking about who or what you are connected to, who would be in your circles? Is there a circle for community? Is there a circle for significant other, whoever that might be? Do you have a friendship circle? Do you have a family circle? And you being in the middle of that, and then reaching out to whichever of those connections or points of connection as you need to. And that kind of mapping out will look very different for everyone. Some people might have a bigger circle for family rather than friends. Some people might have a bigger community circle than they might have a significant other circle. So it's really useful to think about who is around us. And again, thinking, as we've talked in other sessions, around what resources we have. We talked about strengths in the session before this one, in session 2. We talked about strengths and mentioned those environmental strengths that are available to us. So things that are around us in terms of our physical environment. So our physical environment, including things like community groups, faith groups, so things that are outside of our personal relationships and outside of our relationship with ourselves. So it might be something that you're interested in or curious to do for yourselves, to actually have a think about who you are connected to, and then thinking about how you might reach out to those connections, or how you might utilize those connections. And I think sometimes we feel like it might be a bit cold or calculated to be thinking like this, in terms of thinking about our relationships or our connections with people as tools or commodities. But the reality is that we are social beings, and we do need connectedness. It's you know, it's helpful for us to be connected to things, so it's useful for us to reach out to people, but equally it's useful for us and beneficial for our own mental health and well-being to have people reach out to us as well. So there is no escaping that we are social beings, and we are not meant to thrive optimally in isolation or in a sense of or state of disconnection. So how do we maintain connection? We know that times are challenging at the moment, that the usual, I guess, methods that we might use to connect with people are not all available to us, although restrictions are relaxing and things are changing for us, which is great. But that's not to say that just because we're now allowed a certain amount of people in our homes, or particular activities are now becoming more available to us, that we will feel comfortable to do that, because everyone will have different levels of comfort anyway within which they operate. So Some people might be very much about being out and about in the community and connecting socially with activities or people. Some people might still be experiencing a certain degree of hesitation about being out of the house and connecting with people. So I think it's also important, and thinking about that promotion of self-kindness, it's important to realise and acknowledge that just because restrictions are relaxing, that it's not necessarily the case that you have to suddenly be out and about and catching up with multiple people all at once. So it might still be the case that though we can do a bit more socialising than we have been able to over the last few months, that we might still want to be maintaining a certain amount of physical distancing from people whilst maintaining that social connection. So how do we do this? You're watching a workshop online, so I would assume that you have a certain level of competency around technology. It's certainly been a very interesting journey in terms of new learning for myself, having to do things this way. It's not necessarily something that I'm 100% comfortable with. So sometimes, you know, we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone and out of the things that we would regularly do or utilise in order to do and maintain the things that are important to us. So we might have to be creative about the methods that we use to communicate with people, and that might be FaceTime, WhatsApp, Skype, Zoom, any other of those kind of platforms online, using social media. You know, people are doing all sorts of wonderful things out there in the kind of Zoom world in terms of having birthday parties or discos or dance classes or exercise classes. So, you know, I guess it's almost in some ways made a lot more things more available to more people. The fact that we're all sitting in our homes with the, you know, with the luxury of the internet safely available to us. So think about being creative about how you're communicating and what platforms or methods you're using. If you are someone that isn't necessarily totally comfortable with using online resources, there's a very good, I think it's Australian government, and I've got the information on the next slide. It's a website that actually offers a lot of tutorials and information about how to navigate online resources, because you know, there's certain groups of people that will be less inclined towards using technology and will have less skills. The younger folk who are even much younger than me will, you know, it's just natural to be on the phone or on the computer all day, and will be very comfortable with using technology. But I think it's good to acknowledge that not everyone, in spite of their age, is comfortable with technology. So if you're feeling like there are gaps in your knowledge and your skills around using technology and the platforms that we need to use in order to continue to feel connected, there are resources available out there that will support you in your learning. We'll talk a little bit more about routine in the fourth session, but it can be really helpful and valuable when we're thinking about how we connect with people and the intention behind connecting with people, to actually create a very specific routine around it. I might have mentioned this in previous sessions, but I've heard of people having 5 p.m. cups of tea or glasses of wine every day with friends, or, you know, once a week in their own homes remotely watching the same TV show. And a lot of the online streaming TV websites now, you can actually share the program that you're watching with someone and actually share in that experience. So being creative about the routine and the scheduling of those activities can promote that sense of connection. So it's about the intentionality and remembering the meaning of the connection and the purpose with which you are, I guess, entering into that communication. Thinking about who you connect with and for what purpose, that goes back to, again, that diagram about thinking about who is in your circles, who is in your immediate circles, and who is in your more, I guess, outside circles or peripheral circles. and recognizing that there might be some people that you connect with differently and always have done. There might be people that you haven't connected with for a while, that, you know, this has given you the perfect opportunity to recreate or pick up a connection that has perhaps previously been lost or diminished. So think about who you connect with. Is there someone that you know will always lift up your spirits if you're feeling a bit down, or is there someone that maybe that trusted person that you can be vulnerable with? So, you know, accessing what you need and who you need when you need it. And being kind to yourself. And being kind to yourself is about knowing where your gaps and your limitations might be in terms of your skills around accessing some of this online stuff. It might be about being realistic about what you're able to achieve in a day. It might be about, actually, I know I've got that thing scheduled in, but I really don't have the energy today, or I'm not in the mood for it. So recognizing when it's not always the case that you have to make a connection, but being aware of, I guess also, if you are starting to avoid those connections with people, and you are not seeking out connection as much as you might, because that might indicate a change in your mood state or your emotional state. So that's something to be aware of as well. So this eSafety with Be Connected, this is the government website that I was talking about. So that's just the first page of many on the website, but it's a really useful and really user-friendly website that offers lots of, as I said, tutorials and information about how to connect with others. Because, you know, we are being, I guess, forced into connecting with people in a way that we haven't before. So we have to kind of push ourselves to be a bit smarter. And often if we are feeling stressed, which all of us will be at this time, being stressed and feeling anxious or having anxious thoughts can affect how our actual brain is thinking and processing information. So it can also be a hard time or a challenging time to be taking on new skills and to be learning new things as well, because our brain is busy with kind of worrying about being in survival mode, or thinking about, you know, should I leave the house or not? That sometimes the space that is left in there for new information can be a bit compromised. So it's, again, just as with knowing who to reach out to in terms of emotional support, it can also be good to know that there are practical resources out there that you can access to fill in any gaps that you might have. Some other resources that are out there on the internet, on the World Wide Web. So Be Connected, esafety.gov.au is that slide that was up before. Head to Health, I've mentioned this in previous sessions, so they have some very specific content and information on there about how to take care of your psychological health during the COVID-19 lockdown, social isolation period. So a lot of it is similar to the content that we've been sharing in these sessions together. But if you are someone that likes more information and likes to look at things, they've got heaps of resources and worksheets, and you could spend hours on there if you're someone that is prone to getting lost down rabbit holes on the internet. Then you will love those websites. And of course, there is the encouragement, as has been in previous sessions, about if you are noticing that maybe, you know, you're trying all these things, you are trying to maintain a sense of connection, you are doing things that are meaningful to you, you feel like, you know, you're doing all the right things that you're told to do or recommended to do, but still maybe life's starting to feel a bit challenging. It might feel like you're having emotional responses or reactions that you're not comfortable with, and that maybe feel a bit beyond what you're able to do. Then certainly the encouragement is there to not just sit with it. It might be that you have that one person that you can be vulnerable and open with your feelings about, but it might be that you don't have that. So there is definitely an encouragement to reach out to any of those numbers on the or numbers, services that are highlighted there on that slide. So they are 24 hours, they are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So please, and we'll go further into this in the final session, but I guess knowing where to reach out and knowing that there is and are places that you can reach out to is, you know, can be very comforting to know that that's available to us, and that sometimes it might just be that one call that you make that when you're in that moment just normalizes your experience and, you know, makes you feel a little bit more grounded, or a little bit more like, oh, you know, I am still in reality. But knowing that there is someone that is available to you to say, okay, yep, I totally understand what you're describing, or, you know, I'm here to listen to you. And we'll talk more about how to, I guess, bring some of those conversations into our own lives, or, you know, how to have some of those harder conversations. I will go into that a little bit in the fourth and final session. So I guess the take home from, or the takeaway points from today, thinking about that video and what they highlighted there, that recognizing your loneliness is very valuable, and that loneliness is okay. Everyone is going to feel some sense of loneliness or isolation or disconnection during this time. It is inevitable. So thinking about what that loneliness is telling us, it's telling us that there is a need that is not being met. It's telling us that there is a need for connection. Thinking about being vulnerable and having at least one person that you can connect with regularly. One person or persons, whoever that might be for you. Think about who is in your circles. And thinking about being part of something bigger than yourself. So that ties in with what we were talking about in session 2 around meaning and purpose, and, you know, taking opportunities to get ourselves out of our own thoughts can be helpful as well, and can help us provide us a sense of accomplishment as well, and a sense that we still belong to something other than the four walls that we've perhaps been locked into for the last 2-3 months. So hopefully there's been something in there that has resonated for you, or has kind of hit a note for you in terms of the importance of maintaining connection during this time, and at any time really, and thinking about how we might do it. So thinking about those creative ways about maintaining connection with people, with places, with activities that are meaningful and valuable to us. So in the fourth session, we will talk in more detail about routine and structure, and why that is important. And that will kind of bring in some of those elements around, you know, how we look after ourselves, and why routine and structure is so important in maintaining all aspects of our health, whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual, mental health. And also then a bit of a discussion about what to do if we are feeling like that structure and routine isn't working for us, and that we perhaps need to do a little bit more, or to reach out to something more formal or professional in terms of our support needs. So thank you for joining me today. Hopefully that's been, you know, insightful and valuable for you, and I wish you well, and perhaps see you at the next session. Thank you for your time today. Bye.